Welcome in everyone to another deep dive. Today we're going to try to untangle the world of campaign finance in Cumberland County, Pennsylvania.
Right.
So this should get pretty interesting, I think. You wanted to know more about how money flows through local political campaigns, particularly focusing on two names we've talked about quite a bit, Doug Rickards and Greg Rothman. And let me tell you, things get really fascinating.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it's not just as simple as, who's writing a check. It's understanding how the money moves between different committees and PACs and individuals, and
Right.
it's a puzzle that we're going to try to put together.
Yeah, it's like a money trail almost.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to unravel that a little bit today. And to start with, Doug Rickards seems to be at the center of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
He served as treasurer for multiple campaigns, Greg Rothman's, Kaytee Isley's, and even a committee called Kelly and Nate for Cumberland.
Right. And what's interesting about Kelly and Nate for Cumberland is that it was specifically formed to secure two commissioner positions. So, they were going to try to win two commissioner positions at the same time, to kind of create a block within the county government. And so the fact that they had the same treasurer for all of these different campaigns suggests that there is, some type of coordinated strategy going on.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Speaking of strategy, we looked at Greg Rothman's campaign finance report, and it's like a masterclass in using PACs and committees to move money.
Yeah.
There are large sums flowing between Rothman and the Cumberland County Republican Committee and various PACs. It's like a financial ballet with money kind of pirouetting from one entity to another.
Yeah, and that brings us to the Operators for Skill PAC. This is a very interesting PAC because it donates to both Democrats and Republicans, which is sort of unusual. And there have even been articles written about this expressing concerns that they're trying to buy votes to legalize skill games by, they're giving donations to key players to basically influence legislation to be more favorable to them.
Skill games. These are becoming quite a hot topic lately.
Yes.
They're those machines that, look and feel very much like a slot machine, and they've kind of popped up everywhere.
Yeah.
They're not technically considered gambling under current law, but there's a lot of debate as to whether or not they should be regulated more tightly.
Right, and that's exactly what the Operators for Skill PAC is interested in. They're basically representing businesses that are involved in that industry, and so they have a vested interest in trying to see these machines legalized and regulated in a way that benefits them.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting. Remember, Doug Rickards, our multi-campaign treasurer, was also directly associated with the Operators for Skill PAC, according to Transparency USA. So we're seeing a potential link between campaign donations, a PAC with a specific legislative agenda, and candidates who may be in a position to influence that legislation.
Right. And this is, if you connect this to the bigger picture, the bigger question, this really raises concerns about transparency and potential conflicts of interest.
Right.
If you have lawmakers that are receiving substantial donations from an industry that stands to benefit from their votes, does that compromise their objectivity?
Yeah.
It's a question worth pondering.
Definitely. And it's not just Greg Rothman. Remember Kaytee Isley, who we talked about recently, the newly elected county treasurer? She had absolutely no accounting experience prior to taking on this role, which involves managing a 9-figure budget. Right. And her campaign finance report mirrors Rothman suggesting a shared strategy. They both used Doug Rickards as their treasurer. Well, this isn't illegal, but it certainly raises some eyebrows about whether or not Isley has the experience and the independence to handle such a crucial financial position.
Right. And the fact that the Kelly and Nate for Cumberland campaign also used Doug Rickards as their treasurer shows you that there is a network here.
Right.
There's a network of individuals and committees that are connected through their campaign finances. And Doug Rickards is a common thread that weaves throughout it all.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And if you remember from the last deep dive, when we talked about Kelly and Nate for Cumberland, they had that one very unusual donation from a Democrat with the same last name as one of the candidates.
Yeah.
So that just adds another layer of intrigue to this already complex web of connections.
Yeah.
Political alliances might not always be as clear-cut as they seem, and money can flow in unexpected ways.
It really is like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Yes.
The more we look, the more intricate these connections become. And as we delve deeper into this campaign finance network, we're going to start to see how the money flows, how the players are all involved, and what the potential implications are for policy decisions in Cumberland County.
Definitely. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue to dive into this. We're going to pull up a diagram that we have that kind of maps out the flow of money between these various committees and PACs.
Okay.
We'll be right back after this break. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and look at a visual representation of this financial web we've been talking about.
Okay.
We have a diagram here that actually maps out the flow of money between various committees and PACs, and it's really pretty revealing.
Yeah, it's kind of like a roadmap of influence showing us how funds are being channeled from one entity to another.
Exactly. And if you follow the money trail on this map, you'll see that large sums of money are flowing from the Pennsylvania Prosperity PAC to the Cumberland County Republican Committee. And guess who is listed as the treasurer for that PAC?
Doug Rickards, I'm assuming.
Doug Rickards.
Our ubiquitous treasurer. It seems like every path we take leads back to him. It's certainly worth noting that he is in the central position with all these financial transactions. It's like he's the hub of a wheel with all these spokes radiating out to various campaigns and committees.
Yeah, and the connections don't stop there. We also see money flowing from the Cumberland County Leadership PAC to Kelly and Nate for Cumberland. And again, Doug Rickards is listed as the treasurer for both.
And what's fascinating here is that these PACs aren't just limited to supporting candidates from a single party. They're giving money to both Democrats and Republicans, which suggests that they have some broader strategic goal that goes beyond, simple partisan politics.
Yeah, this whole web of financial connections that we're seeing here makes it really difficult to track the original source of the funds, and it obscures potential conflicts of interest. It's like we're trying to follow a chameleon through a kaleidoscope.
Yeah, the lack of transparency is definitely a cause for concern, I think.
Yeah.
Who are the original donors behind these PACs? What are their motivations, and how might their contributions be influencing policy decisions? These are all questions that are worth considering.
Absolutely. There's also this kind of enigmatic consulting firm called DTR Consulting that seems to be involved in moving money between political entities. But the specifics of what they actually do are kind of unclear. It's like they're operating in this shadowy corner of the financial landscape.
And that lack of transparency is troubling because what exactly are the services that they're providing? Why are they being used to channel campaign funds? And are there any potential conflicts of interest involved? It's just another layer of obfuscation that really warrants further scrutiny.
Yeah. So we've got Doug Rickards at the heart of all this, connected to multiple campaigns and PACs and this kind of strange consulting firm. We've got Greg Rothman, who's received substantial donations from the Operators for Skill. It seems to be very adept at navigating this whole complex world of campaign finance. And then we have Kaytee Isley, whose lack of experience in mirrored financial practices to Rothman really raised questions about her qualifications and her connections to this network.
It's a reminder that, money in politics is rarely straightforward. It often flows through this sort of labyrinth of organizations and individuals, making it really challenging to track the original source and its intended impact. And this lack of transparency can erode public trust and make it very difficult to hold our elected officials accountable.
And speaking of accountability, let's go back to the Operators for Skill PAC and their interest in influencing legislation related to these skill games. As we've said, they're really pushing to see these machines legalized and regulated in a way that's going to benefit their industry.
Right, and the debate over skill games is very complex. On the one hand, you have opponents who argue that they're essentially unregulated gambling devices that prey on vulnerable populations and siphon money away from the state lottery and casinos.
Right.
They point to the lack of oversight, the lack of consumer protections, and argue that these machines are ripe for abuse.
On the other hand, you have the proponents of skill games who argue that they are legitimate games of skill that provide entertainment and revenue for small businesses. They claim that skill games generate tax revenue for the state, although that claim is disputed.
Right. So you have these two competing narratives, and each side is presenting their arguments and lobbying for their interests. And the Operators for Skill PAC is using its financial resources to make sure that their voice is heard in this debate.
Yeah, it really highlights how campaign contributions can be used to amplify specific agendas and potentially influence policy decisions. It's a reminder that we need to pay attention to who's funding our political system and what their motivations might be.
Right now, let's take a closer look at Greg Rothman's campaign finance report because it shows that he has a pretty sophisticated understanding of how to move money between committees and PACs. It's like he's playing a game of financial chess, and each move is carefully calculated to maximize the impact.
Okay, give us an example of that.
All right, well, for example, you'll see large sums of money moving from Rothman's campaign committee to the Cumberland County Republican Committee, and then back to Rothman's campaign through various peaks. So it's this kind of circular flow of funds that can make it very difficult to trace the original source of the money and its intended purpose.
And even if it's not illegal, like we said, this practice still raises concerns about transparency. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is this movement of money designed to obscure the original donors? Does it make it harder to track spending and hold candidates accountable? These are all questions that deserve scrutiny.
Yeah, this lack of transparency is really concerning because it can erode public trust and create a breeding ground for cynicism. If voters can't follow the money, how can they be confident that their elected officials are actually acting in their best interests?
Exactly. Transparency is absolutely crucial for a healthy democracy. It allows voters to make informed decisions, to hold their representatives accountable, and to ensure that the political system serves the public good and not just the interests of wealthy donors and special interest groups.
So it seems like we keep coming back to this idea of transparency, or really the lack of it. Why is that so important when we're talking about campaign finance?
Well, without transparency, voters can't really understand who's trying to influence their elected officials and, are those influences aligned with what's best for the community?
Right.
It's, without transparency, it's like we're kind of left in the dark.
Right.
And we can't fully assess whether there are conflicts of interest or, really hold our representatives accountable.
So if we shine that transparency spotlight on Kaytee Isley's election, what do we see?
Well,
She's now the county treasurer. She's responsible for a 9-figure budget, but she had no prior accounting experience.
right.
Her campaign finance practices are very similar to Rothman's. They both use Doug Rickards as treasurer. Does this raise any red flags for you?
It certainly makes you wonder, did Isley's campaign benefit from the same network of financial connections that we've seen with Rothman? Did her lack of experience become a talking point during the election? Did her association with Rickards and Rothman play a role in her victory? These are all questions that voters should be asking.
Yeah, and if we just kind of step back and look at the big picture, what's the overarching takeaway from all of these connections that we've seen, all this flow of money, these potential conflicts of interest?
Well, I think the key takeaway here is that campaign finance matters, even at the local level.
Right.
It's not just about, who's donating to who. It's about understanding, how money can potentially influence our political system. Money can buy access, it can sway opinions, and it can definitely shape policy decisions.
So what can our listeners do?
Yeah.
How can they get more involved?
Yeah.
How can they become more informed about what's happening, especially when it comes to campaign finance?
Well, I think staying informed is crucial.
Okay.
Keep up with the local news, especially coverage of elections and campaign finance. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Right.
Reach out to your elected officials.
Yeah.
Inquire about their campaign finances.
Ask them about their stance on issues that are related to money in politics.
That's great advice. It's really our responsibility as citizens to, hold our elected officials accountable and make sure that they're actually acting in our best interests.
Absolutely. And we can all play a role in promoting transparency and accountability in our political system. And that starts with being informed, asking those questions, and demanding better from our leaders.
Well, this has been a very fascinating deep dive. We've followed the money trail, we've uncovered some connections, and we've raised some really important questions about transparency and accountability.
Yes, we have.
But this is really just the beginning. There's always more to uncover, more to question, and more to do to ensure that our democracy remains of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Exactly. Every voice matters. So stay engaged, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.